Just a couple quick reminders. The Q&A is open for questions and we will respond to those as soon as we can. We will also be recording tonight's presentation for translation and for posting on our website at a later time for those who couldn't join us tonight. So thank you so much everybody for joining us, and we'll start in a couple minutes. Thanks. Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. My name is Emily De La Guerra. I am the Director of Finance and Administration for the Fresno Housing Authority. And tonight, to introduce our topic and to kick us off, I would like to welcome Preston Prince, our CEO and Executive Director.
Emily, and I am blocked. The host won't let me do my video.
Oh no. Let's see if we can change that. Hoping.
Well, I'm fine. How about I'll do a quick introduction. I just want to welcome everyone to this conversation around move to work. It is that a beep? Sorry. No, that didn't work. Okay. Oh, there I am. I do see me. So welcome. I'm really excited to share with you this opportunity that Fresno Housing has and to get your thoughts. Move to Work is a little bit of a misnamed program. It sounds like a jobs program or something like that, but it's really an opportunity for housing authorities to become more efficient and effective in how we do business and to test ideas that will allow our families to be successful and for the housing authority to be, as I said, more efficient and maybe serve more families. And so I'm excited to hear your feedback, and I'm going to turn it back over to Emily and listen in. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Preston. So welcome. Thank you, everyone, for joining us again. My name's Emily. And then, Lyric, did you want to take a second and introduce yourself?
Hi, yeah, hello everybody. Thank you for joining us this evening. I'm Lyric Agigam. I am the policy analyst for the agency and I work in administrative services. We are excited to share some details with you regarding the Moving to Work demonstration program. I will be here if you guys have any questions or concerns, and that's it. I will turn it over to Emily and we'll start the presentation.
Thank you. And just a reminder, we do have the Q&A open, so if you have questions as we're going along, please feel free to use the Q&A. You can also raise your hand and we can call on you and turn your mic on. We really do want this to be a discussion to get your all's feedback on this Moving to Work demonstration program. As Preston mentioned, the name is a little misleading. It's not necessarily about work or moving, but it's really, again, about how do housing authorities become more efficient and provide better services to their residents. So definitely looking to get everyone's feedback tonight and answer any questions that you may have. So as a reminder, this is a program that Fresno Housing is still considering. We have been invited by HUD to apply for the Moving to Work demonstration program, but we haven't yet made the decision on whether or not we will apply. And one of the things that can help us make that decision is the feedback that we get from you all tonight from our residents. This program is going to affect it's hopefully going to make the services that we provide better. It's going to enable more housing opportunities for Fresno County and our current residents. So it's something we're really excited about, but obviously we want to hear your feedback on the plan as well. So if you could go to the next slide. So just a quick overview of our presentation tonight. We will talk a little bit about moving to work and what it means. We'll talk a little bit about the expansion of moving to work and this demonstration program. We'll go through some of the advantages of MTW status, what the advantages are to us as a housing authority, and then also what some of the advantages to our residents are. We'll talk about who will be included in the MTW program, who's eligible, and then who would be excluded. We'll talk about what is called cohort 2, which is rent reform, which is basically the cohort that we've been invited to apply for and to test. And then we'll go over the application timeline and the conclusion. So today's conversation is really just a high-level overview of the Moving to Work demonstration program and what rent reform would mean for our agency and for our residents. We have another informational session scheduled for November 2nd, which we will be inviting all of our residents to again to talk about more specific details of rent reform, the rent reform model that we decide, and then the other initiatives that we'll be taking on potentially with our MTW status. So what is moving to work? As Preston mentioned, the name is a misnomer. This is a program that was designed by HUD and launched in 1996. There are currently 39 housing authorities across the nation that have this MTW designation. And as part of this expansion, HUD is allowing an additional 100 housing authorities in the United States to participate in this program. What MTW does is it offers a housing authority the opportunity to design and test innovative and locally designed housing and self-sufficiency strategies. So, you know, it gives a lot of flexibility to design and test different approaches, whether they be to make our programs more cost-effective, more efficient, or to provide better services to our families and to our residents. The advantages of MTW status. One of the things that is an advantage to the housing authority is it gives regulatory relief to test innovative policies and programs. For those of you who are on who participate in our housing choice voucher program, as well as our public housing program, you know that there are a myriad of rules that we as an agency have to follow, from how your rent is calculated and what kind of expenses can be deducted from your income, to how often you get a recertification, to how often your unit is inspected, right? All sorts of rules that HUD gives us that we have to abide by, and also the resident has to abide by. And what MTW does, it allows us flexibility to change those rules, to analyze those rules, to think about what's best for the organization, what's best for the residents, and what's going to make our programs, our HCV and our public housing programs as successful as possible. MTW will also, if you could go back real quick, Lyric, sorry. MTW also gives us some financial flexibility and administrative cost efficiencies. By having less rules, there's fewer rules for us to administer. So we do have financial flexibility that we can, you know, take that cost savings and reinvest it into our programs, into our agency, and into services for our residents. Speaking of services, another advantage of MTW is that we can provide more resident services and help our families in a multitude of different ways, whether it be, you know, if families are interested in increasing their household earnings, if they're interested in health initiatives, Home ownership is something that comes up a lot. Educational initiatives, so that financial flexibility and administrative cost efficiency allows us to invest additional dollars into services for our residents. And then the last advantage of MTW, one of the many, is to provide increased housing choices for eligible families. So one of the main requirements of MTW as an agency, if we were to apply and be selected, is we could not serve less families. So this is not a way for agencies to get out of, serving less people, or as we talk about kind of cost efficiencies, it's not about, reducing our payment standards for families or reducing the amount of money that we're spending at our properties. This is about increasing our services, increasing choices for our family, and making our programs that much more efficient and successful for our residents.
Emily, I know we have a couple questions, so I'm just going to stop you right there. So Tiffany Eason said, how does this help or benefit me?
Mm-hmm.
And it depends on, the type of housing that you are living in. And we will get into a little bit more details as we go on. If we don't answer that question for you, probably about halfway through, I'll address it again, but I believe we get into like the nitty gritty a little bit further. And then I also did see that Angie raised her hand, but I don't know how to get to her. I don't think she's able to speak, but I did see her raise a hand. So
is it our Angie?
Yeah.
Okay. Angie, I think I have asked Angie to unmute if she would like to join in.
Okay, we can further, I guess, and then we'll pause if she wants to comment.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Oops, sorry. I can go, it's fine. So cohort 2 is rent reform. This is the cohort that we are most interested in. And so currently most HUD-assisted households pay a rent or participant contribution equal to 30% of their adjusted income. And that is also known as the Brook rent. So that is, again, what we are currently doing. Cohort number 2 would then test 3 alternative rent models. So our goals for this would to include incentivizing higher earnings, minimizing hardship, reducing administrative burden, as Emily had mentioned in the last slide, and the budget is neutral. So test rent number 1 model would be a tiered rent system, and that is income-based. The second model would be a stepped rent system, and that is not income-based. And then the third one, which I know we are most interested in, is something that we can propose. It's an alternative rent model, and we'll go into further detail in the next slides. But I know that we do want to use rent model number 3. So some eligible and excluded households. So, I think we mentioned it earlier, public housing and HCV programs, they are eligible. And then existing assisted households and new households that would be admitted during the enrollment period, which I believe is about a year, they would also be eligible as well. So elderly and disabled households would be excluded. Households with special purpose and home ownership vouchers would be excluded. Any households that are paying a public housing flat rent or ceiling rent, households already participating in the family self-sufficiency program, and any households whose properties operate under the PBRA or the RAD program.
And I think one of the important things to mention about that, while these families who are listed here under excluded would be excluded from the rent reform study. They would not be excluded from the additional benefits and services that we could provide with MTW status. So for example, if there's elderly or disabled households who aren't participating in the rent reform study, but would like to participate in a potential home ownership program that we could offer with our MTW status, they would be able to participate in those types of services. So, you know, as part of the MTW program, we are required to implement this rent reform study. And so this slide just shows who would be included in the rent reform study and then who would be excluded.
So model number 1, again, it would be a tiered rent system based on income, as we had said earlier. But within each tier, we would look at your income. So any income increases within a tier does not affect the household rent payment. So for example, as you could see in the table chart below, if you make anything between $2,500 and about $5,000, you know, you would be in tier number 2. And your tiered rent would be $94. And at the bottom, you can see that this is subject to change. This is just an example. But, you know, we do take into consideration hardships. They are available for families who experience a loss in income. But again, any income increases during this time frame, it does not affect your household rent payment. And then recertifications would be completed every 3 years, and households would be placed in corresponding tiers based on the new adjusted income. So again, super important, if you do have an income increase within the 3-year time frame, your rent will not be increased.
And we think that's one of the real advantages to our residents and to our families for participating in the rent reform study, is because, you know, over the course of 3 years, if your income does change, right, if you get additional hours or, you know, work or get a raise, that money goes straight into your pocket, right? And you can spend that on the things that your family needs, and your rent would stay the same for 3 years. So that's all money, instead of, you know, what we normally do now, where your rent stays the same or your tenant payment stays the same up until your recertification, right, which happens annually. So your rent would change. Currently, your rent changes on an annual basis. Under this model, your rent would change potentially every 3 years.
Tiffany, that could potentially answer your question. You did ask, how does this help or benefit me? And that is one of the benefits. So model number 2, rent payments are increased according to a fixed schedule, regardless of income changes. And I just want to state that Fresno Housing is not considering this method. You know, annual rent payments would be increased according to a fixed schedule of 2 to 4% per year. So last model, every 3 years, you know, your rent could potentially increase. This one would be annually. And it's based on unit size and fair market rent.
Mm-hmm. And the reason kind of where we think this would not be beneficial to our residents, because say your income is flat, right? Your income doesn't change. I make $10,000 a year and my income doesn't change. Under our current model of rent, how we calculate rent, your rent would stay the same, but under this model, your rent would continue to grow 2 to 4% every year, which we don't think is in the best interest of our residents. So that's the reason we're not considering test rent number 2 for MTW status.
So test rent model number 3, this is the model that we most consider. We hope that we can test this model out, but we basically can propose an alternative rent model, we don't have to use number 1 or number 2, and it has to be a tiered or stepped rent system. And we also must have 4,000 non-elderly or disabled households. So we would propose an income-based tiered system similar to test rent number 1. And we have an example on the next slide. Whoops, sorry. So, you know, it is income-based, as you can see, and the table at the bottom is very similar to model number 1. But this time we are establishing the tiers in $5,000 increments. Within those tiers, rent is, I'm sorry, oh no, sorry guys. 30% of your gross income at the low point of the tier. And the household's gross income is calculated, and it is you will be placed in the corresponding tier, and any income increases within that tier during the 3 years before the next recertification would be, I'm sorry, my whole entire screen is black. Emily, can you take this? I can't even read it.
Sure. Yeah. So, so the idea for test rent number 3, as Lyric had mentioned, is that the tiers would be in $5,000 increments, and then within those tiers, the rent is based on about 30% of the gross income at the lowest tier. So you can see right here, if you look at the example under tier number 2, tier number 2, for those who are making gross income of $5,000 to $10,000 a year, their monthly rent would be $125 a month. There are a couple different distinctions in test rent number 3 versus number 1. One is that the rent is set at the low point of the tier. So this $125 monthly rent is calculated based on 30% of $5,000. Under test rent number 1, you actually have to set the rents at the midpoint of the tier, so right in the middle. So for tier number 2, it would be 30% of $7,500, which is in between. We like this method better because we feel like for those who are on the lower end of the tier, the rent burden would be less. It also allows for more income growth within a tier before you'd move up to the next tier. And one of the key distinctions, I think, as well in test rent number 3 is that income would be calculated based on your gross income instead of your adjusted income. So as you all know, as you come in every year to do your annual recertification, you have to bring in sort of all of your income documents. You bring in any medical expenses, all of the deductions, right? The adjustments that have to happen to your rent. And that takes time and takes work both for you as well as for our administrative staff as well. And we think this proposing to do rent set on gross income rather than adjusted income would be a real big cost saving measure that the agency could implement, that we could reinvest those dollars back into the program, whether as, you know, additional households to serve or higher payment standards or additional services to our families. So it's definitely something that we're thinking about and considering, but would love to hear feedback from our families on whether or not they think that's a good idea or not, and if that would help them or they think that wouldn't benefit them in the long run. So those are the couple kind of distinctions between test rent 1 and test rent 3. As Lyric mentioned, we are sort of leaning towards the test rent number 3 model, but again, we're open to feedback throughout this process.
Thank you.
Slide.
I have my screen fixed.
Okay, good.
I don't know what was going on. So Our application timeline. So today, October 14th, we have our first resident/HCV program participant meeting. November 2nd is our second resident participant HCV program participant meeting. And that will be a time, I believe, where we're going to try to finalize our draft and talk a little bit more about rent model number 3. And then November 3rd, which is the day after, we will have a draft for you guys to inspect, and there will be a 30-day public comment period. It begins that day. And we do want to hold a public hearing at the board's meeting on November 17th. So any comments that you guys may have or feedback, questions, anything of that sort that you guys would like to bring to the public hearing, that would be great. Again, that's November 17th. And then December 3rd, public comment period ends. So that's a pretty important date for you guys if you do have feedback. December 15th will be the day that hopefully the boards approve of the resolution and or of our plan by resolution. And then January 8th, the application is due to HUD. So 2021 would be when this would be implemented, but we do hope that you guys suggest, some of your opinions and feedback, any questions that you may have. You can email us. You can share this presentation. It is being recorded. Emily, do you have anything on the application timeline before I proceed? Okay, and then in conclusion, if we are selected, HUD anticipates 6 to 12 months before policies are implemented. Once enrollment period begins, households will be assigned to the control group or treatment group. So control group, everything will stay the same, nothing will change. Treatment group, we will implement the new rent policy. And then households will undergo a regular income examination. And this enrollment period, we anticipate to last about a year. And the study is expected to last 6 years after the enrollment period is concluded.
Yeah, and really based on the current timeline that we have right now from HUD, I would, even if we do choose to apply and are successful in our application, I can't imagine that any of this would begin before 2022. So, for our residents who are with us today, if we are chosen, if we are selected, there won't be any immediate changes to the program. We will obviously continue to keep you all updated, keep you informed on the status of our application and whether or not we are selected, and then obviously continue to update you when or if we expect the enrollment period to open. So again, I can't imagine it's going to be this year in 2020. Very unlikely that'll happen in 2021. Probably happens sometime in 2022.
All right, so again, the next MTW meeting will be on November 2nd at 5 p.m., same time. Questions and answers from today's meeting will be posted on our MTW webpage, and we will take questions at our email, mtw@fresnohousing.org, and I think we do, hold on one second, we do have a couple other questions. Monique asked, so how long can you utilize the program? So once it is in place, it will be 6 years. And she also asked, so are they going to allow you to move? Emily, do you know that answer?
Sure, yeah, depending on, I think, the program that you're on, whether you're on HCV or in public housing, you are still eligible to move units, or if you're an HCV, you can, move properties or change landlords if you so choose. So that's definitely, that will still be an option for families under this program.
Thank you, Monique. I think that is it. Yeah. Did we have any other questions before the end. Comments, feedback.
Or, yeah, there we go. One more question it says.
So Monique asked, so we must stay local.
If you are on the I'm assuming you're on the HCV program, you are still allowed to port under the program. If a HCV resident chooses to port out from Fresno County, the rules would not apply to them. But we can follow up with you about your specific situation for sure. So if you want to send us an email to mtw@fresnohousing.org, we can follow up and address your specific situation depending on what program you're on. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us, and look forward to having more conversations.
Good night, everyone. Thank you.